There was a time when waking up next to Lauren felt like the most natural part of being alive. The mornings were slow and warm, sunlight leaking into the bedroom while she tucked her cold feet under my legs and complained about how early the kids would eventually drag us out of bed. Back then, our biggest problems were things like who forgot to buy coffee beans or whose turn it was to deal with Noah's refusal to wear socks. We were just us, a couple that had grown together, stretched together, survived parenthood together. 14 years in total, 11 married, and somehow we still found ways to make each other laugh in that quiet, domestic kind of way people rarely notice from the outside. She was ambitious, always had been. Her job in marketing kept her buzzing with ideas and deadlines, and even though the pace sometimes scared me, it also lit her up. I watched her career climb like a firework, and I was proud, genuinely, stupidly proud, that her brilliance was finally being recognized. I worked remotely, tapping through lines of code while she bounced between meetings and presentations. I never envied her schedule, but I admired her ability to carry so much weight and still hold our family together at the end of the day. At least, that's how it used to be. The shift didn't happen overnight. It crept in quietly, invisible at first. A sigh here, an eye roll there. The way she stopped lingering during dinner, how she kept glancing at her phone even when the kids were telling her stories. She snapped more easily. She corrected me about small things, the way I folded towels, the way I spoke to the kids, even the way I breathed beside her at night. I laughed it off the first few times, thinking she was overwhelmed at work. But it kept happening. And the woman who once curled into me now slept wrapped in a fortress of blankets, facing away, shoulders tense even in her dreams. I told myself that marriages go through phases, that after so many years, comfort sometimes mutates into indifference, and you just have to push through. I tried harder, cooked more, cleaned more, took the kids to give her space, made date night reservations, bought her favorite wine. She thanked me, but her eyes were somewhere else, far away, unreachable. Her schedule stretched into long nights and early mornings. She joined new committees at work, volunteered for special projects, took on extra travel that didn't quite make sense to me. Industry summit, she said once, bag already packed before I even knew she was leaving. Client engagement thing, another time, as she hurried out the door while I tried to get Noah to put on his shoes. I asked questions gently. I tried not to sound suspicious because I wasn't suspicious, not really, just confused. Concerned, worried that I had somehow lost the map to the woman I married. She always had an answer. It's just a busy season. This is good for us. I'm doing it for my career, for our family. And she'd smile, but it was thin, rushed, almost professional, like she was trying to close a meeting rather than reassure her husband. The intimacy evaporated almost without me noticing. Weeks went by without us touching in any meaningful way. She blamed stress, headaches, work trips, fatigue. I believed her because believing her meant I didn't have to confront whatever this sinking feeling was inside my chest. The kids felt the shift too. Ava became quieter, like she was studying the air in the room, sensing things adults tried to hide. Noah acted out more, clinging to Lauren only to be met with distracted pats on the head or promises to play later that rarely happened. I tried to bridge the gap, to be both the calm parent and the fun one, but something always felt off, like our family rhythm was limping along instead of flowing. The first time I truly felt that something was wrong was when Lauren came home from a strategy weekend that her company supposedly organized. She looked different, not physically, but in the way someone looks after living another version of their life for a few days. Relaxed, in a way she hadn't been around us for months. Glowing, soft, and oddly distant, like she had returned but hadn't fully come back. I remember hugging her, and she hugged me too, but only with her arms, not her body. There was no warmth, no melting into me the way she used to. She said she was exhausted and immediately took a shower. I sat in the living room listening to the water running and feeling something cold crawl up my spine. Still, I justified, rationalized, explained it away. People change, jobs change, stress piles up. Maybe I wasn't being supportive enough. Maybe I was the problem. But the excuses started wearing thin. She began going on overnight travel more frequently, always with short notice. Meetings in other cities that didn't match anything on the public calendar her company proudly shared online. She guarded her phone like it was an organ she couldn't survive without. Notifications turned off, screen always tilted away. She'd take calls outside, even on warm nights when mosquitoes swarmed the backyard. And our conversations, the real ones, the vulnerable ones, simply stopped. She answered with half sentences. She avoided eye contact. She smiled at the kids, but rarely at me. It felt like living with a ghost who still paid the bills and slept in the bed, but had nothing left to give. I kept thinking, this can't be it. You don't build 14 years together only to drift apart silently, without a reason. Yet every day, the silence grew heavier. I didn't know it then, but the truth was already there, waiting, patient, like a shadow just beyond the edge of the light. The moment the truth finally showed itself didn't feel dramatic. It didn't feel cinematic or explosive. It felt small, stupidly small, the kind of moment you barely notice until it cracks open your entire life. It started on a Thursday morning, one of those unremarkable days where the house felt half asleep and the kids were shuffling around getting ready for school. Lauren had left early for some client workshop she didn't fully explain, rushing out the door with a travel mug and barely a goodbye. I was cleaning up breakfast dishes when I noticed something tucked behind the toaster, wedged against the wall like it had been dropped in a hurry. It was her smartwatch. At first, I didn't touch it. I just stared at it, feeling this weird pulse of curiosity and dread. She never forgot electronics. She was the kind of person who double-checked chargers and notifications before bed. For a few minutes, I tried to convince myself to ignore it, put it aside, hand it to her when she came home. But the house was too quiet, and something inside me, the part that had been uneasy for months, pushed me toward it. I picked it up just to set it on the counter, just that. But when I lifted it, the screen lit up automatically. A single preview, a calendar notification, private event, recurring, location that made my stomach twist. I told myself not to tap it, not to invade her privacy, not to become the paranoid husband I never wanted to be. I put the watch down, took a step back, paced, came back, and finally, without fully realizing what I was doing, I picked it up again and tapped the notification. The world didn't shatter immediately. It just tilted. There were appointments I'd never heard of, trips that matched nights she claimed to be overwhelmed at work, notes tied to certain weekends with vague titles that didn't sound like business at all. I scrolled further. Messages synced from her phone, hidden threads, a photo preview that made my throat close, another, and then another. My hands went numb before the rest of me did. There's something uniquely horrifying about catching up on a reality everyone else already knew existed, something that makes your chest feel carved out. I stared at the tiny screen, as if looking long enough would turn everything into a misunderstanding. But the truth wasn't hiding anymore. It was right there, cruelly matter-of-fact. 16 months, maybe 18. Dating back so far, it made me dizzy. I sat down because my knees weren't holding me anymore. The kitchen felt too bright, too quiet, too normal for what was happening. I wanted to call someone, But who do you call when your life suddenly stops making sense? I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't even cry. There was only static. For a long time, I just sat there, gripping the edge of the table, the watch lying in front of me like a bomb that had finally gone off. Eventually, I forced myself to move. I needed more information, not because I wanted to torture myself, but because I think some primal part of me needed clarity, needed to know where my reality ended and the lie began. I grabbed my laptop and went into a kind of survival mode. Emails, travel confirmations, work logs, bank statements, folders she didn't know were shared. A trail of breadcrumbs that formed a map of betrayal. And the deeper I dug, the clearer it became. None of this was new. At some point, I realized this wasn't just a physical relationship. It was emotional, too. They traveled together. They stayed overnight in different cities under the guise of professional development. They deleted threads but missed things synced to the cloud. There were photos that weren't explicit but were intimate enough that I understood exactly what they meant. The worse it got, the quieter I became. I don't know how many hours passed before I finally stopped. And when I did, I felt like a hollow version of myself. The R-rated version of shock, where your entire nervous system goes offline. The kids were already home from school by then. I don't remember making them dinner. I don't remember putting them to bed. I only remember sitting in the dark living room afterward, everything silent except the ringing in my ears. That's when her name came to me. Not Lauren's, but his wife's. I didn't know much about her, just her first name, mentioned casually months ago when Lauren talked about some charity thing at her boss's house. I looked her up, feeling guilty and desperate and sick. Social media wasn't locked down. There she was. Photos with their kids, happy family trips, anniversary posts with captions about trust and partnership. I stared at her face, and all I could think was, does she know? Or is she living in the same hell I've been living in without realizing it yet? I hesitated for almost an hour before messaging her. Just one line, not angry, not accusatory, just asking if we could talk because I believed something was happening between our spouses. She replied in 2 minutes. Her first message was confusion. The second was fear. The third was a question I didn't expect. What exactly did you find? We exchanged pieces carefully, like handling glass shards. She had suspicions, but no proof. I had proof, but no understanding. She shared that he'd been distant, secretive, taking odd trips, changing his passcodes. She said she felt crazy, like she'd been imagining things. I told her I understood. Then we started matching dates. And suddenly, everything lined up too perfectly. Her husband's overnight trip matched Lauren's leadership conference. Their extended offsite matched Lauren's branding retreat. The weekends when they both left home simultaneously matched the recurring calendar events I saw on the watch. We weren't imagining anything. We weren't paranoid. We weren't unstable. We were being lied to, methodically, consistently, confidently, for over a year. At some point, I realized we'd been talking for nearly 3 hours. She cried. I apologized, even though it wasn't my fault. At the end, she said she needed time, but didn't want to stay in the dark anymore. We agreed to keep sharing information, not out of revenge, not yet, but because the truth was too heavy for each of us to carry alone. When the conversation finally ended, I closed the laptop, leaned back on the couch, and stared at the ceiling. Everything felt wrong. The air, the room, my skin, my name. I didn't know what I was supposed to do next. I didn't know who I was supposed to be now. The only thing I knew with absolute clarity was that the life I thought I had was gone. In the days that followed, life became divided into 2 versions. the one everyone saw, and the one unraveling inside my head. I still made lunches, still helped with homework, still did bedtime stories, but everything felt mechanical. My body was going through motions while my mind replayed every moment of the past year, trying to understand how I missed all the signs that now felt glaringly obvious. Lauren acted normal when she was home, or the version of normal she'd grown into these past months, distracted, quick, efficient, detached. She didn't notice how quiet I'd become, or maybe she did and didn't care enough to ask. I kept watching her, not out of paranoia anymore, but out of a strange, numb curiosity. Every time her phone lit up, my stomach tightened. Every time she mentioned work, I waited for something in her voice to crack. But she stayed calm, almost too calm, as if she believed her web of lies was airtight. Maybe she thought I would never question her. Maybe she believed I was too trusting, too complacent, too gentle to look. I no longer felt gentle. At night, when she fell asleep facing the wall, I lay awake scrolling through everything I had found. Screenshots, records, shared files she didn't know were still syncing. Every digital trace was another punch to the ribs. But knowing wasn't enough. I needed certainty, something undeniable, something that would hold up if she tried to twist the story, rewrite it, or convince me I was imagining things. Pain makes you methodical. I opened spreadsheets, made timelines, matched trips, synced timestamps. When the pieces came together into a complete picture, I felt sick. It was organized, repeated, comfortable. They had routines. And worst of all, they were bold about it. Madison messaged me often, not out of obsession, but because she didn't know who else to talk to. Our conversations became a strange lifeline, a place to exist honestly without having to pretend. She sent me screenshots she found in old backups. I sent her calendar entries, trip confirmations, expense reports. She found photos from her husband's work getaways that matched the dates Lauren traveled. I tracked down messages Lauren forgot to delete from her cloud. We compared everything like investigators, two wounded people pushing through heartbreak because truth is a kind of oxygen, ugly but necessary. Sometimes she broke down in the middle of our chats. Sometimes I did too. Grief came in waves, sudden and violent, crashing into me when I least expected it. I'd be making the kids breakfast and suddenly remember a weekend Lauren said she was burnt out, only to realize now she'd spent it in a different city with another man. I'd feel the room tilt, and I'd have to grip the counter until it passed. Madison had her own stories. Nights when he came home smelling different. Days where he claimed to be stuck at work but couldn't explain his overtime. Times he canceled family plans with vague excuses. She'd wondered, doubted, but never had proof. Now she had more than she ever wanted. There's something haunting about realizing your pain is mirrored in someone else's life. Two families living side by side in a lie neither of us consented to. It created a strange bond, not romantic, not emotional in that sense, just deeply human. Shared devastation. We spent 2 weeks collecting everything. Screenshots, financial records, synced calendars, travel itineraries, photos, and even a few voice memos Madison found in her husband's cloud drive. The more we uncovered, the more I realized this wasn't a fling. It was a full-fledged secret relationship, complete with inside jokes, planned weekends, hotel reservations, and messages where they talked about needing space from responsibilities. responsibilities meaning us. There was a moment, a long, horrible moment, when I thought about confronting Lauren directly. Sitting her down at the kitchen table, spreading everything in front of her, asking her why. But every scenario I imagined ended in her lying, flipping the narrative, gaslighting, crying strategically, or accusing me of invading her privacy. The betrayal was too deliberate, too extended. She wasn't going to come clean because she already had a full script prepared for every inconsistency. So I kept quiet. One night, long after the kids were asleep, Madison asked me the question I'd been avoiding. "What are you planning to do?" I stared at the screen for a long time, feeling something shift inside me. Not rage, not heartbreak, clarity. The kind that arrives cold and sharp, changing the way your bones feel. "I think I'm going to file." She replied instantly, "Me too." It wasn't a triumph. It was surrender. Acceptance that the people we loved had already left our marriages 18 months ago. We were the ones catching up. Over the next few days, we both consulted attorneys separately, comparing only the general outlines. Her lawyer advised gathering everything before confronting him. Mine told me the same. Evidence first, confrontation later. Emotions cloud strategy. They warned us that cheaters often scramble when exposed, hide assets, deny everything, or try to manipulate with tears and half-truths. The smartest path was clean, coordinated, and documented. Madison suggested aligning our timelines, not to be dramatic, but to cut off the lies simultaneously, to prevent them from running to each other with rehearsed responses. The idea felt harsh, but also necessary. What they did wasn't impulsive. It was organized, so our response needed to be organized too. We spent hours figuring out dates, timelines, paperwork. There were nights I barely slept, staring at the ceiling, wondering how my life had become a blueprint of someone else's betrayal. But the plan gave me direction, something concrete to hold on to while everything else crumbled. The last missing piece was timing. We needed an opportunity where they'd both be together, where the illusion would be at its strongest and therefore easiest to shatter. And then, almost too perfectly, Madison found it. A work retreat Lauren had mentioned offhand, scheduled for the following week. Same city, same hotel, same lie. I stared at the message from Madison, feeling my pulse thudding in my neck. This was it. The moment the truth would finally be louder than their secrets. I didn't feel powerful. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt tired, exhausted in a way that settled into my bones. But for the first time in months, I also felt certain. This was going to end. When the morning of the so-called work retreat arrived, I felt strangely calm. Not peaceful, more like the stillness right before a storm touches the ground. Everything inside me was muted, as if my emotions had been wrung out over the past few weeks, and now only the shell remained. I packed a small bag, even though I didn't need one. A water bottle, a hoodie. My hands needed something to do. The kids were with my sister that weekend, something Lauren didn't question because she thought she'd be out of town anyway. She left the previous evening with a tight smile and some generic line about team-building workshops. I watched her close the door behind her, knowing that the next time she saw me, she wouldn't be using that tone ever again. Madison and I had coordinated every detail with our attorneys. Serving papers isn't dramatic in real life. No slamming folders or shouting lawyers, but the timing mattered. We wanted the shock to be simultaneous, clean, precise. No chance for them to warn each other. No chance to rewrite the script before it landed. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted finality. I wanted the truth in the open, right where they never expected to see it. I met with an off-duty police officer who specialized in document service. He wasn't there to arrest anyone or make a scene, just to ensure the paperwork was delivered properly and without escalation. He introduced himself calmly, professionally, the way someone does when they've seen far worse situations than mine. On the drive to San Antonio, he didn't ask questions. I appreciated that more than I expected. Silence made things easier to hold together. The hotel was as beautiful as the photos Lauren had once shown me during better years. Her eyes lit with excitement about architecture and vibes and how she wanted to stay there someday. And apparently she had. Just not with me. When we pulled into the valet area, my pulse finally started picking up. Not with anger, just anticipation. The end was near. Whatever came next, at least the limbo would be over. The lobby was warm and elegant, filled with soft lighting and quiet conversations. I stood near the center, the officer just behind me. My palms were cold, despite the heat outside. Madison texted me, "We're in position." Her attorney was somewhere nearby with her own server. It felt surreal, like the four of us were characters in a play none of us wanted to star in, but the script was already written. Then the elevator opened. Lauren stepped out wearing a plush white robe, hair damp, skin glowing the way it does after a long spa treatment. For a split second, my mind flashed back to the beginning of our relationship. The softness of her after a shower, the way she'd curl her hair around her finger. The memory lasted less than a breath. Then reality took its place again. She saw me before she saw the officer, and the look on her face shifted so rapidly it almost hurt to watch. Confusion first, then concern, then a flood of fear so raw she had to grab the edge of a chair to steady herself. Her lips parted, trying to form words, but none came out. She clutched the robe tighter around herself, even though modesty was the last thing at stake. The officer approached calmly, announcing her name and purpose. I didn't speak. I didn't move. I just watched as she accepted the envelope with trembling hands, staring at the papers like they might explode. She shook her head slowly, then faster, whispering something I couldn't hear. A few guests nearby paused their conversations, sensing tension, but not understanding the gravity of what was unfolding. I was about to turn away when the second elevator opened. Madison's husband stepped out, also in a robe, also fresh from some luxurious treatment meant to hide the rot underneath. He saw Lauren first, then me, and then Madison emerging from the quiet corner near the bar. Her face was pale, eyes swollen, but blazing with a fury I had never seen in anyone before. Her server stepped toward him with the same practiced professionalism mine had shown. His expression collapsed instantly. Jaw slack, shoulders dropping. No attempt to pretend, no attempt to deny. Just a man exposed, stripped of the illusion he thought no one would ever penetrate. For a moment, the four of us simply stood there, two betrayed spouses, two cheaters, and a truth so loud it drowned out everything else in the lobby. Lauren finally tried to speak, not to deny it, not to lie, just to plead. Her voice cracked, her face twisted with panic, her hands reaching toward me like I was the only solid ground in the room. But I stepped back before she touched me. I don't know if I did it instinctively or intentionally. I just knew I couldn't let her hands on me, not in that moment. Her knees buckled slightly, and she leaned against a pillar, gasping for breath. She kept shaking her head, apologizing, begging, bargaining in half sentences. I didn't respond. I didn't trust myself to speak without collapsing. Madison stood firm across from her husband, who was trying to approach her with outstretched arms and frantic whispers. She didn't budge. She was steel. And then it was over. The officers confirmed delivery. The papers were officially served. The moment we had planned and dreaded and needed had passed. I turned without a word and walked out of the lobby. The air outside felt too sharp, stinging my lungs. The officer followed me silently until we reached the car. Only then did I finally exhale, a long, broken breath that felt like releasing months of suffocation all at once. The drive back to Austin was quiet. The world outside blurred through the windows. I thought I would feel relief or satisfaction or even triumph, but all I felt was heavy, bone-deep heavy. Betrayal doesn't free you instantly. First, it crushes you. Then, it empties you. And only eventually does it let you rebuild. That evening, the house felt too big, too quiet. Every sound echoed like there was something missing, because there was. A life, a marriage, a belief that had just died in a lobby hours earlier. I didn't want revenge. I didn't even want an apology. I wanted my life back, whatever that meant now. And for the first time, I realized I was finally on my way to getting it. In the days after the hotel, the house felt like it was holding its breath. Lauren didn't come home that first night, or the second. I didn't ask where she was. I didn't check. I didn't care. But on the third day, just after sunset, I heard the front door open quietly, like she was afraid the house might reject her the way a body rejects something foreign. She looked smaller somehow, not physically, but spiritually, emotionally, psychologically, like someone had shaken her until pieces fell off. She didn't try to hug me. She didn't raise her voice. She simply stood there, clutching a bag with her shaking hands, her eyes swollen and red, in a way that told me crying wasn't something she'd done once. It was something she'd been stuck in. I waited for anger or accusations or excuses. Instead, she crumpled into this raw, desperate sorrow I wasn't ready for. In the beginning, she didn't talk about the affair. She talked about the kids, about wanting to keep things normal, about wanting to shield them from what she'd done. But eventually, the dam cracked. She said she'd made a catastrophic mistake, that she'd been spiraling at work, that she'd convinced herself the affair was escape, relief, validation. Words poured out of her in disjointed pieces: shame, guilt, self-loathing. There was no justification, and somehow that made it worse. She begged for therapy. Not as a couple, not yet. She said she needed to fix herself first, because she was broken in ways I never saw. She booked individual sessions twice a week. She wrote long, handwritten letters I found on my nightstand or slipped under my door. Pages full of apologies, so intense they were almost frantic. And then the transformation started. It was unsettling to watch. She quit her job within a week. The career she built for years, gone overnight. She said she couldn't stay in the same environment where everything started, that every hallway, every meeting room, every team dinner felt poisoned. She told me she understood if I didn't care, but she needed to do it for herself and for the kids. Next came the postnup. Her attorney drafted it exactly how she insisted. I would keep the house, the savings, the retirement accounts, full decision-making power for the kids. She said she wanted me to feel safe after she destroyed the foundation. Her exact words. Hearing them felt like being punched. Then she changed everything about her presence at home. She started cooking dinner again, trying new recipes, overcompensating in every direction. She became overly affectionate with the kids, almost afraid to let them out of her sight, like she thought they'd vanish if she blinked. She offered to take on all the chores, all the appointments, all the tasks she used to share or complain about. She apologized every time she walked past me, even if we hadn't spoken for hours. And then, one night, she tried something else. She approached me after the kids went to bed, standing in the lingerie she hadn't touched in years. Her voice was shaking as she said she wanted to relearn how to be my wife, that she wanted to reconnect physically because she missed me, needed me, loved me. There was desperation in the way she touched my arm, not seductive desperation, but survival desperation. I stepped back. She broke, again. The next morning, she apologized for that too. Therapy made her softer, but also more intense. She cried often, sometimes uncontrollably, sometimes silently over the sink while doing dishes. She wrote lists of ways she planned to rebuild trust: daily transparency check-ins, location sharing, phone access, passwords. She even suggested a trial separation where I could explore other people if that's what it took for me to heal, promising she would wait and fight for the family she'd destroyed. There were moments, brief, confusing moments, when I almost gave in, when her pain made something inside me twist, and the part of me that had loved her for more than a decade wanted to reach out and hold her together. But the feeling never lasted, because underneath the sorrow and gestures and therapy breakthroughs, there was still a crater where trust used to be. Love doesn't disappear overnight, but something in me had been severed in that hotel lobby, and no apology could stitch it back together. The divorce went through quietly. She didn't contest anything. She looked defeated the entire time, her grief hanging off her like heavy fabric. But she honored the postnup. She honored every agreement. She honored every step. And eventually, painfully, slowly, we found a rhythm. Co-parenting became workable, civil, even strangely supportive at times. But we were no longer partners. We were two people trying to minimize the damage left behind. Madison entered my life gently, not romantically at first. Just two single parents dealing with overlapping schedules, similar wounds, and kids who surprisingly bonded without hesitation. Our messages shifted from logistics to check-ins, from short updates to real conversations. She didn't rush anything. Neither did I. I wasn't ready, and she understood that before I said it out loud. Months passed before something shifted. A long conversation after a school event, a shared coffee while waiting for our kids, a moment when she looked at me with this quiet understanding that my chest loosened for the first time in months. We laughed, a real laugh, and the sound felt foreign but good, like rediscovering a part of myself I hadn't realized was missing. When feelings finally surfaced, they didn't come with fire or chaos. They came with calm, patience, a steady warmth that grew in the spaces where hurt used to live. Introducing the kids was natural. They already saw each other often. They already felt safe together. And slowly, two broken families started forming something new, not replacing what was lost, but building something separate, something honest. Lauren eventually stabilized too. She continued therapy. She apologized again months later, gentler this time, without desperation, just acceptance, closure. We finally forgave each other, not to fix anything, but to let the past stop bleeding. And one evening, much later, as I sat on the couch with Madison beside me and our kids sprawled across the living room arguing about a movie, I realized I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Home. Not the one I built with Lauren, the one I rebuilt from the ashes. Thank you for giving this story your time and attention. If you'd like to share your thoughts or interpretations, drop them in the comments. I always read them. And please subscribe for more stories crafted just for you.